For this section, you need to get your piece A for the front, and you need piece D, which is your pocket front. So we'll just take off our labels. Now you need to draw the same lines on that you drew for your back panel. So 5 inches in from each side and 6 inches in from each side. So if you draw those chalk lines in, and then your 3-inch down, your lines for your 3-inch down from the top for where you're going to stop sewing your webbing. So then you need to get your pocket. Now if you haven't already, you need to mark your centre mark, and if you haven't already, mark the centre marks at the top and the bottom on your front panel. And we're just going to line this pocket up in the centre with that centre mark, and we just need to pin that in place. I'm just going to pin from the top down. And then where you've made your little slits here, these little slits that you've made in the bottom, we're going to use those to fold your pleat in. So this one will be on the top, the one on the right will be on the top, and the one on the left will be underneath. So it should just automatically fold at that little point where you've done those slits. So that should just fold under that way, and then when it folds forward on the top, it should fold where that little slit is there. It should automatically fold at the edge there. Okay, so you want to get that all neat, and when that sits flush, when it's flat straight against the edge, that's when you know you've got it in the right place. So everything should all be straight across the bottom. Here we go. So can you see then that'll just sit flat? So you've got one of the slits is there in the bottom fold, and one is here in the top fold. So then you just want to pin that one in place, and then do the same on this side, but the fold will be pointing in the opposite direction. Okay, and then once we've done that, we can then pin these side sections in place. So make sure everything's straight. The sides will just come up the side of this line here. That's our pocket all pinned into place, so it just sits just to the side of this 6-inch line from the edge. Okay, so that's all nice and flush in there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to sew from here, back stitch here, sew down across the bottom at about 1/4 inch, and then up the other side and back stitch off there. Just you can sew about 1/4 inch, an 1/8 to 1/4 inch in for that. It's going to be covered up by the webbing straps. Okay, so don't forget to back stitch at the top. Okay, so that's your pocket all sewn in. So what we need to do now is we need to sew, just like we did on the front, you're going to sew your handles on, so they will line up roughly inside that 5-inch mark. Pin them on, they will cover all the sides of your pocket, so that will help keep that in place as well, and then pin them up to your 3-inch mark. Do the same down this side, exactly the same as you did on the back of the bag, and then you're also going to insert your grab handle in exactly the same place as you did on the front of your bag as well. Okay, so when you've done that, you've sewn your handles on just the same as you did on the back. You could go back and watch that if you need reminding, and then we'll move on to the next stage. You're going to need piece C for base for the next bit. So I've got my front panel here and my base. So you've got your front panel right side up and then your base panel right side down. You should have already marked your centres. If you've not, you need to do that now on the front and the base so it gets lined up okay. So I'm just going to pin that into place in 2 or 3 places. And then you're going to start right on the edge, back stitch, stitch all the way across and end and back stitch there. So back stitch at the start. And back stitch. Okay, so we're going to repeat that with our back panel. So have your back panel faced up on the table and put your front panel right side down. Fold your base panel out so it's right sides together with the front. Line up the centres, pin in place, and then just repeat exactly what you just did on your front panel. Okay, so we're going to sew our side panels together. So there's your bottom panel here. So it's already right side together. So line up your side edges and pin or clip. Just put one at the top and one at the bottom first. Make sure everything lines up. And then what you're going to do here is you're going to start at the top, back stitch, and sew all the way to the end. Okay, and then repeat on the other side. Okay, that's our side panels all sewn together. So next we're going to sew the box corners. Okay, so you want to line up your centre points. You should have your centre marked here and line up that with the centre panel at the bottom. So I'll just do that again. So your corners okay, so your corners will look like this. So this is for your box corner. So pull this side and pull from the other side and pull it into shape like this. Now then, this is I've got the bottom facing up here. So line up your centre point on the bottom side with the seam on your side seams. Now I'm just going to open that seam there. You don't really have to, but it'll just sit a bit flatter. And then pin that seam. Okay, and then I'm just going to add a couple of pins going across. One on this side and one on this side. This is just easier before you pull it into shape. Okay, now you need to get, before we pin the corner bits, you just need to pull your bag open as if you were doing, okay, pull your bag open as if you were doing a regular box corner. So your bottom is completely, the bottom side is completely facing up. And then you need to pull it like this and you will have the side angles like when you've done box corners on pouches and other things. So it's just pulling it all into place. Okay, so just pull it all so it goes, so the bottom sits flat, completely flat, and then your sides will go off at angles. So this is my front side here, and this is the back side here. Now, as you can automatically see, got these bits pinned, but you'll see your side seams pull in here and sit flat. Well, you want that to happen. Okay, so I'm just going to ease that up a bit there. Just pull that up straight. And then your sides will fit in. Make sure the whole thing is flat. It's not pulling in here. Pull it out so it sits flat. If necessary, you could get a couple of pins and pin that so it doesn't shift once it's flat. If you're using a fabric where you can't pin it, you could clip it at the sides. So this is then just like any other boxed corner, but these side seams, you wouldn't normally have these side seams here when you're doing a box corner, but because we've put a different corner in the bottom, we've got these two side seams, so they do automatically, you can see they pull round, which is just fine. Pull that up. I'm just going to then pin that into place. Just pull that up a bit so it sits flat and it just bends. You can see the corner just bends over and round there, that seam. Okay, like that. So you can see there, look, I'll just show again. This is where you've stitched to. That's your seam stitched all the way along. And then that seam will just pull round. It pulls down a little bit there. But you can just oink that back into place a bit. Get it as lined up as you can. And then make sure this is sitting flat. And then pin that. I'm just going to add another pin there, make sure that stays in place. Don't want it slipping. It just makes your box corner seem a little bit different than they normally do, just because we've got these two seams here, but they pull into the centre and wrap round. And then we're just going to stitch that along at a 1/2 inch. I'm just looking at the back to make sure there's nothing puckered, because that's wrapped around. Okay, so that's pulled around. So we're now just going to stitch that at a 1/2 inch. So that's my 1/2 inch mark there. Just going to line up there. I'm not going to start at the end. I like to back stitch off. Now, my seam is a bit bulky here because it's got it had the seam in from the tea towel, so just bear that in mind in case you need your bulky seam aid to put under the back. Can you see my foot's tilting forward? You could put your bulky seam aid under the back of there. Right, so I'm just going to back stitch off the end. This is easier than trying to initially go forward. And then, as it's a big bag and it might contain a lot of things, I'm also going to zigzag stitch that on the seam just to make sure, because this might be under quite a lot of stress if you put a lot in it. Use your bulky seam aid there if you need to do. That button on your foot there, if you didn't know what it's for, that's like a bulky seam aid as well. So when you lift your foot right up, hold it in and put it down, and if your foot's tilted, it should stay in. My foot mustn't be tilted too much because it's not staying in. if your foot's at an angle, that will stay in, and then as your foot straightens out, that pops back out. Okay, so there you go. And you're going to repeat that on the other corner. Okay, so there you go. That's what your corner looks like from the outside. If you find you've gone past the end, it's probably just because you've gone a bit over your 1/2 inch seam allowance, that's all. There we go. Right, next you need your piece eye. You've got 2 of these for the top, so we're just going to work with one initially. So just remove that, make sure you've got the right side. Now if you're using a shower curtain like I am, just bear in mind if you haven't overlocked it, it is quite a frayy fabric. So the first thing you need to do, if you haven't already, is to find the centre. Okay, so just fold it in half and either mark or snip where the centre is at the top and the bottom. And then you need a marking pen and a ruler. It's because you're going to put a couple of marks on. So where the centre is, at the top, where the centre is, you're just going to mark 1 inch either side of that mark. I've already marked mine. So 1 inch either side of the centre mark. And then at each end, you're going to mark 1 inch in from each end as well. This is to give us for lining up for these drawstring cord channels. Okay, so these should fit between your marks roughly. So you want to get some pins or some clips. This is quite long, so I'm just going to use a few clips. So you've got, turn it upside down. So you want your folded edge at the top pointing down towards the inside and your raw edge at the top. So basically just line this up between your marks and clip it or pin it all into place, and then we're just going to stitch that on. Okay, so that's all clipped. You could clip the other one on as well, but I find it's going to be easier. I think you've not got too many clips hanging around to just stitch this one first and then clip the other one into place, so you haven't got too many clips hanging around. Okay, so I'm just going to use about 1/8 of an inch because we're just basting this into place. So I'm going to use a longer stitch, maybe 4mm stitch length, and I'm just going to baste this into place so it's inside your seam allowance. Okay, so that's all basted into place. So just repeat that with the other one on the other side between your other 2 marks. Okay, so that's all basted into place. So you need to get your other piece eye, and then we're going to put that right side together over the top of this one, so that your raw edges all match up. And then again, we're just going to clip that all the way down. Line up your centres if you've marked your centres. If you haven't, I've noticed here I've got 2 pieces sewn together. Now you shouldn't have that if you're using a shower curtain, but if you're using shorter pieces of fabric, you may have to join a couple of pieces to get the length that you need for this bag. So mark your centres, match your centre points up, clip or pin it all the way down, and then again we're just going to base stitch this in at about 1/8 of an inch with your longer stitch length to hold it all together. It was easier to put the channel in, stitch that one on first. Okay, so we've sandwiched this together, clip it or pin it all the way down, and then we're going to sew it at 1/4. So we've clipped, found our centres, joined the centres, clip or pin it all the way down so all your layers are together, and then we're going to sew it at 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you've got an overlocker, you could do this with an overlocker because of how much it frays. If not, you could use an overcast stitch on your sewing machine if you've got an overcast stitch where it stitches over the edge. If not that, just sew it with a straight line and then go back and zigzag the seam to help stop it fraying if you've got a particularly fray fabric like I have at the moment. Oh, and sew this at your normal stitch length. Okay, so that's it sewn all the way down. I'm just going to go back and as you can see, this is fraying quite a lot. I'm going to go back and do a zigzag all the way down as well. Okay, there we go. That's the edge all zigzagged or overlocked, or whatever you choose to do. You might want to, if you've got lots of frayed edges, you might want to trim them off. But hopefully that should help stop it fraying any further. Okay, so there's your channel stitched in. So open it out flat, and then we're going to take the 2 short edges and sew those 2 short edges together. Okay, so we're going to sew our edges together and then match your seams. So these are lined up. You're not going to stitch through that section at the moment, so you shouldn't stitch them down. And then we're either going to clip or pin this. Okay, and then we're going to take this to the machine and we're going to stitch this seam, back stitching at each end at 1/2 inch. So then go back again and overlock it or zigzag it if you haven't done that already. Okay, so that's the seam allowance done. Excuse the shadows, that's from the curtains in front of me. Okay, so now we've done that, we want to turn the whole thing right side out. And then we're going to top stitch this all the way around. Now, if you're using the cotton fabric, you can obviously press this, but as I'm using a shower curtain, that makes this a little bit more difficult. I recommend bringing both threads up for this so you don't get any nesting. So I'm going to try and pull both of these taut from the top and the bottom. You could go all the way around and pin this and do this if you wanted to. I'm just going to try and do this without pinning. So I'm just going to start in the seam. Make sure you change from your zigzag stitch. And I'm going to do it at about 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to do it at about 4 millimeters long, my stitch length. So hold your threads so it doesn't nest. Give yourself a couple of back stitches. And then you just have to keep rolling it under at the back. Just do a bit at a time. So I'm trying to pull against this and pull against this side to keep it all flat. Okay, there we go, top stitched all the way around. Okay, so take your draw cord panel, have your open sections here on the side, and then you've got a seam on one side, and you might not have a seam on the other if you've done it like mine. I wouldn't have, but I cut it wrong originally, so I have a seam. But if you don't, you need to mark the centre for the seam allowance. Mine's slightly off the centre, so I'm going to just put a little V in it, and then you want to open it out and go back that way, line up your seam, again your 2 centre points there, so everything should line up here. Line up your 2 centre points, and then mark your sides again. This is so you've got centre marks in 4 points. Then get your bag, so it'll be right side out. Make sure that your handles are pointing down on both sides towards the bottom of your bag. And then you'll have your draw cord section with the draw cord section pointing towards the bottom of your bag. Now, whichever side you want to see on the outside when it's finished, have that on the inside here of the draw cord, and then this side will be down inside. It'll be on the underside and you won't really see it in your bag. So then slip your bag into there and pull that down towards the bottom. I've got my draw cord sections on each side lined up with the seams on the bag, and pull it down till your raw edges all match. So then you should be able to line up your centre points and clip them into place. Same on the other side. And then line up your seams. Now my seams are quite bulky because I've got some of the hem allowance, the hem from the tea towel in there. So I'm going to open my seam out. Clip that. And then do the same on the other side. Should have a mark there or a seam to go to. Again, I'm going to open my seam up, otherwise it'll be too bulky. Clip that. So with your 4 main points clipped in, then everything else should just fall into place, and clip all that all the way around into place. Okay, so this is now all clipped into place. Now you could go around your free arm on your machine if you wanted to do this bit. So I've just got to take that off. And then we're just going to stitch this in, base stitch this in again. It's not it doesn't have to be perfectly stitched in. You don't need to really back stitch at the start and the finish. We're going to stitch this in at about 1/4 of an inch or width of foot. I'm going to do width of foot seam allowance because the final seam allowance is 1/2 inch, so we should be sewing just past that. So anywhere between 1/4 of an inch and 3/8. And just base stitch that in all the way around. You can use something to help you stop this fabric gathering up because it is very slippy. It is it's not the easiest fabric to work with. Okay, there we go. I've got a couple of little tucks in it, but I'm not too overly concerned about that. So there we go. That's your draw cord section stitched in. So for now, we're just going to leave that down on your bag while we sew the lining together. Now, I've not added any pockets or anything on the inside lining, because thinking of it as a beach bag, you might be just going to put big towels in there and your swimsuits that might be in another little bag and things like that. So if you want to add any pockets to your lining pieces, now's the time to do it before you start sewing everything else together. But as it stands, I'm just going to do them as they are. You've got your 2 B panels, front and back. This is your lining, and your C piece for your base. So basically, you're just going to do exactly what you did for the outer fabric. You're going to sew your base to one of your linings, just so, like so. When you've done that, you're then going to sew it to the other lining. Make sure you like the things are right sides together. So you're going to sew the next one on, and then you're going to sew up the sides and then box the corners, just like we did on the outer fabrics. So when you've done all that, you may want to overlock your edges if you haven't already done it. You could do that after you've stitched it together with a zigzag stitch again, just to make sure everything doesn't fray so badly. Okay, so once you've sewn your lining, so then you're going to have your bag, your lining, right side in, wrong side out. Get your outer bag. Now make sure at this point that your zip on the back panel is open, because you're going to turn the bag through there. So if you don't do that, then you'll find you'll not be able to turn your bag through. So then you're going to put your bag out in a bag inside your outer bag. Make sure everything's tucked down, your draw cord section's all tucked down inside. And then we're going to line everything up. So all your centre marks need to be lined up. And then you're going to pin that or clip it, whichever you choose to do, all the way around. So if you pin all your centre points first, then do your seams at the side, and then put all the rest in. Okay, so I've clipped and pinned this all the way around. Now I've used quite a lot of pins because this is quite a slippy fabric. I thought I would use quite a lot of pins, make sure nothing moves. So now we're just going to put this, I'm putting this over my free arm. Doesn't really matter where you start. And I'm going to sew all the way around at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So this line here is my 1/2 inch seam guide. I'm going to use maybe a 3mm stitch length, a bit more than normal, as we're going through quite a few layers now. If you've got a walking foot, you might find this a little bit easier using a walking foot. I've just taken the I've lifted my foot ever so slightly. I can set my machine to lift it just ever so slightly, but if you've got a walking foot, because you've got a few layers, that might help. If not, and you find it's pushing the fabric, you might just have to use, like I was before, using a tool and help push it through. Find me curved scissors can be quite good for that, or a pair of tweezers as well. So back stitch at the start and the finish. And just take your time. Okay, so that's it. I've gone all the way around. If you're not happy, if you've gone a wavy line, or you could just quite easily go round again and straighten everything up. And then at this point, you might want to go round and do an overlock, if you can overlock, or do a zigzag stitch all the way around. So I'm going to do the zigzag. think I'll do, it's quite wide here, so do 4-inch wide and about 3 length. I'm hoping will be enough. Okay, so there we go. That's all zigzagged. Okay, so now to the best part. We're going to be turning our bag through to the right side. Okay, you could trim these off a little bit if you wanted to. I quite often leave them like that, but because they're black, we might see them through this lining. So you might want to just heat seal those with a lighter just to make sure that they don't fray. Make sure you don't catch any of the rest of your bag, because we sealed that before. Just be careful of the cotton underneath if you're going to do that. If you don't want to do that, you could zigzag over the edges of that strap as well. Okay, so now this is the inside pocket, your lining pocket. Reach inside there and you should be able to pull the whole bag through your pocket. Okay, push everything out. Push your lining down inside. Okay, just push the draw cord down inside for a minute. Okay, so that's everything tucked down inside. There's your draw cord panel and there's your lining. So for the minute we're going to tuck everything down in, and then what we want to do is we want to roll all this back. Again, if you were using cotton fabric, you could press this into place. You could press this on the outside, but it might be quite difficult on the inside. Now I'm just going to pin this so it holds it down, holds the lining down inside, because we've just got to top stitch this all the way around now. So pin it all the way around. So I've rolled, you can see there, I've rolled the line into the inside. So if you do that all the way around and pin it down, if you can press it with your iron, that would be helpful, get a nice neat finish. Right, okay, so I would suggest now we're going through some quite thick layers now, so it could be a good idea to switch to a size 90 or a size 100 universal needle. Depending on how thick your layers are. Mine on the side here are really quite thick because there was a couple of sections where the hem of the tea towel was ended up in my seam, so it's made it quite bulky. So I'm using a size 100 universal needle, but if you've got a size 90, that's probably a good idea. If you're just doing it in a quilting cotton, and not like what I'm using with the tea towels and the shower curtain, you still might want to at this stage put a new like a size 90 needle in, and you'll find it much easier to go round. They also have a bigger eye in the needle, therefore they can you can use a thicker top stitch thread as well if you're wanting to do. Okay, so I'm going to top stitch this first. I'm going to go around a 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to go around again, probably maybe at a 1/2 inch as well. Okay, so I've got both thread ends out so you don't get any nesting underneath. I've put lots of pins in to make sure nothing slips, to keep your lining down inside because it's a slippy fabric. So there we go, that was straight through that with a size 100 needle. It's designed for thick stuff and it's brand new, so it's nice and sharp. So I'm just going to do a couple of little back stitches there. You may need your bulky seam aid as well, if you find you need to do, so you don't get any skip stitches, for using under the back of your foot. One of these, if you don't know what I'm talking about, one of these that you can put under the back of your foot to level your foot out. Oh, and increase your stitch length. I've just forgotten to do that. So increase your stitch length up. I'm going to go up to 4mm. I'll re-stitch over that bit when I get there. Okay, so that's the first time round. So the next time round, because it looks nice when you've got a draw cord top, it looks nice if it's stitched, if it's stitched further down inside the top. So I'm going to do this second line at width of foot. Most of my first line became width of foot, I think. Okay, that bit's a bit sticky for my needle. Okay, and then I'm just going to follow my line along the edge of the foot. Make sure there's nothing in the way that shouldn't be. Leave it at that. I mostly got that all in a straight line, so there we go. So that's all that in. So you just need to sew up the lining inside your bag. So the easiest way to do this is you can just fold it in, fold the edges in, pin, fold the edges in, pin it like that, or clip it, and then just stitch it close to the edge. So you could do that all the way along. Just fold your two edges in to the centre. Press a seam. If you're doing it in cotton, it's a whole lot easier. But this is a bit slippy. This doesn't really crease. Okay, so you just pin it all the way along, and then stitch along that edge, quite close to the edge, and that would seal up your pocket. So all we've got left to do now is add the draw cord, and then we'll be done. Okay, so to insert your draw cord, if you've got an end that's coming unwound, like this one, I'm just going to put a bit of sellotape around it, and then using a bodkin or some other kind of tool, a safety pin, you could put a safety pin through that end. Now you've got sellotape on it, pin that through. These you can grab, sellotape's handy to have. You grab it between the tweezer ends and then just push that down and it holds it tight. So then you just want to add your draw cord in. And then we're just going to go through this side as well. Come out the end, then go back to this end where your cord is across like that. And then you're going to start going through this way and go the opposite way round so that you're popping out the other side. Okay, so congratulations, you completed your bag. So there we go, big pocket on the front, nice big zip pocket on the back. Your drawer cord will drop to the inside when there's nothing in it, or you've not got anything in the top, it'll drop down. Protect your things on the beach from the sand, or contain much larger things inside. So give yourself a pat on the back for completing that. Don't forget to share your makes with me. You can email me them at hjbirkin@outlook.com, and then I can share them on my Facebook page, my Woolly Elephant Facebook page, and in my Ko-fi gallery. I'll link all these things below.